Good evening and welcome to the City of Farmers Branch Planning and Zoning Commission Study Session Meeting of Monday, February 10th, 2025. We will open the meeting at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to begin by thanking the commissioners for their service as we enter into our study session with item A1, receive ethics training session from the city's attorney's office. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Ross with White Hamilton Finley, the city attorneys here in Farmers Branch. I'm going to be going over a few broad considerations with regards to ethics. The last time I was here in October, and I presented just a legal update training on general issues. And so we're going to kind of narrow it down for a focus today on ethical considerations. As this is an open meeting, I will not be fielding any questions with regards to hypotheticals, maybe past cases, anything of that nature. Ethics issues are pretty fact-based, and so it's hard to give an adequate opinion without a lot of background information. So that's why we've made that determination. But as always, if you have any questions that arise with regards to ethical concerns, or maybe whether or not you should be required to recuse yourself or fill out an affidavit, just please feel free to give us an email and give us the facts, and we'll set up a time to discuss those issues, okay? So when it comes to ethics, it does matter to make sure that you're staying within the planning and zoning responsibilities and roles set forth for you in state law and in the city charter. So the last time I was here and did this training, we talked about what are the things that the Planning and Zoning Commission is supposed to be considering and what's more left for council. So the commission is to carry out the duties and powers provided in the comprehensive zoning ordinance and state law. Also approval of plats as provided in the subdivision ordinance. And then other powers that the council may confer upon you from time to time. As we know, zoning is the location and use of buildings and structures. You can regulate height, number of stories, densities, size of yards, courts, other open spaces, and the bulk of buildings because it's a home rule city. So zoning regulations, these are the things that we discussed that is really within the commission's purview when making these determinations, right? So as to zoning only, again, council may consider all sorts of other things with regards to things before them, but with regards to zoning, these 6 or 7 things are the things that the commission should always stay focused on in your discussions and in your considerations. Lessening congestion, traffic, securing safety from fire, panic, and other dangers that can also look at traffic. All of these things, I'm not going to just read them to you, but if any of these fall within what your concerns are, then that is absolutely your purview and your role and responsibility to consider those things. As we know, platting is a little bit different. It's ministerial, and there's not a whole lot of discretion there, right? So if it complies with what the code requires it to comply with, and it's in line with state law, then the commission must approve that. So ethics and conflicts of interest, these are ethical consideration for all officials. And so even when state law may not apply to a commissioner because you're not elected, the city charter often imposes those same ethical considerations upon you as well. So chapter 2, articles 2 and 3 are really where you're going to find most of those things. Again, we're not going to go through and read every single one of those. I am going to bring out a few of the most common issues that commissioners face. So does the Code of Ethics in the City Charter apply? The Code of Ethics does apply. So the Code of Ethics says that it applies to members of all city boards, committees, or commissions as defined by the article. And that article specifically states that it does apply to you. It says that such term includes but is not limited to the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So under state law, a public official would generally be any person who has some level of authority over the governance of the city. In addition to council, appointed boards and members, it typically, in some instances under state law, because you're an advisory body, it would not apply. But because the city charter provides that it does, and that state law allows for that. So it's the policy of the city in the city code and the charter that officials be independent, impartial, and responsible only to the people of the city. No official shall permit any interest, financial or otherwise, direct or indirect, or engagement in any business, transaction, or professional activity conflict with the proper discharge of such person's duties in the public interest. And again, public office can never be used for personal gain. I think that one's pretty straightforward. So Chapter 171 of the Texas Local Government Code is where some of the details come from, right? And so even if the city charter becomes out of date, like there are certain things that the city would not be able to impose against state law. So substantial interest is, in some instances, it's defined clearly in the law, right? It talks about if you're related to someone within the first degree by consanguinity, owns 10% or more of voting stock, owns either 10% or 15,000 or more of the fair market value of the business entity. And it talks about in real property if the interest is in equitable or legal ownership with a fair market value of 2,500 or more. That's not going to be the only instances where someone may feel like they might have a conflict. So that's just something that is set forth in state law. Some of the other situations that may arise may be, say you have a close family friend, you don't feel like, you feel like maybe you would be able to be impartial, but it would not, it wouldn't look good to the community if you were to make those decisions. Then feel free to reach out and discuss whether or not, what steps you should take on those, okay? Because if you're questioning it, it's typically something that you would want to raise and walk through, okay? So officials and officers are to disclose employment, business, and familial relationships with any vendors who either do conduct business or consider conducting business with the local government entity. There is a long list of exceptions. However, there are some legal considerations involving gifts, and the Texas Penal Code applies here, but then in the city's charter, it discusses that no officer or employee shall ever accept directly or indirectly any gift, favor, privilege, or employment from any public utility corporation. So there's a section that specifically applies to public utilities. There are a long list of things that if you want a refresher, I encourage you to just kind of browse through that occasionally, just so that it's, at the top of your mind, because something that you may not think is an issue at all may be in that city charter. So we just really encourage everybody as a refresher to look at that pretty consistently. So any recommendations to council should be done through the process set forth in the law, right? So commissioners risk allegations of improper influence when personally addressing pending matters with council members. So the charter specifically says that commissioners cannot use such person's official position to secure special privileges or benefits for themselves or for others. Commissioners can't grant any special consideration, treatment, or advantage to any citizen, individual, business, organization, or group beyond that which is normally available to every other citizen, individual, business, organization, or group. And the commissioners may also not disclose any confidential information, and we'll go through that here again in a minute. But I really want to point out where it says that, granting any special consideration beyond that which is normally available to every other citizen. And so before it said for the commissioners or for anybody else, right? So that risk that we're talking about, even if you think that you are conducting everything in the utmost ethical way, and you are going to a council member about a specific thing that was either on your agenda or it's coming up on your agenda and you're discussing those things. And I'm not even saying that you would be doing something wrong to do that in all circumstances, but what it does is it opens you up to allegations that you would not have otherwise have to defend, right? So if you just discuss it in the P&Z meeting and then it goes to council and let council make their determinations, you're never going to be put in that uncomfortable position to try to have to defend yourself or have us have to defend you against improper allegations. So just remember the Open Meetings Act. So any discussion or deliberation between a quorum or between a quorum and another person regarding public business or policy which the council controls or supervises, or during which formal action is taken. So just be very cautious. Again, I think I discussed this at my last training, but I'm going further. Just make sure that, you know, if you're talking to somebody and then that person's talking to somebody and then that person's talking to somebody, it can get you in some murky areas. So again, just make sure that you are, and if you have questions, talk to staff. If you need to talk to other commissioners about things, this right here is the place to do it, okay? So executive sessions. This is kind of our segue into the confidentiality issues, but subjects of discussion must be authorized by law. So anything that is being discussed in executive session should be very specific types of legal advice. Not all legal advice is going to be covered by executive session. Economic development issues, the value or transfer of any real property that the city may own or be acquiring, personnel issues, prospective donations and or gifts to the city. There's a long list of things that that can be discussed in executive session or closed session and not subject to the Open Meetings Act. However, those things that are allowed to be discussed in those executive or closed sessions, they're allowed for a reason. And the reason that they're allowed to be discussed in there is that these issues can adversely affect the city if discussed in the public, right? They can hurt the other citizens of the city by thwarting what the city is able to accomplish in these goals. So council, and in your case, the commission, is who decides who may be present in those closed sessions. But once those things are discussed in those closed session, the city really does, it eliminates confidentiality and it can put the city at risk, right? You know, it shouldn't be for public disclosure. And it also should not be assumed that anybody else who was not specifically in that room has that information yet, right? So, you know, if you learn of something in your executive session with regards to a certain, let's say it's legal advice on a land use issue, and then you go out and discuss it with somebody else, the city may lose that confidentiality exception. So disclosure of certified agendas or recordings of closed meetings. That is actually a criminal offense in Texas, but it's of the actual agenda or the recording, right? It does not cover conversations. Conversations, the risk is to the city. But if it's an actual copy of an agenda or the recording of the closed meeting, then that can subject you to criminal liability. So what is confidential information? It's any information to which an official has access in such person's official capacity, which may not be disclosed to the public except pursuant to state or federal law, and which is not otherwise a matter of public record or public knowledge. Confidential information includes information from a meeting closed to the public pursuant to the Texas Open Meetings Act, regardless of whether that disclosure violates the Texas Open Meetings Act or the Public Information Act. There may be other things that are deemed confidential by law. Most of those are not going to come to you unless it's in an executive session. So again, while 551, 146, that's the Texas Open Meetings Act, does not criminally prohibit any members of a governmental body or other persons in attendance from making public statements about the subject matter of the executive session, the city charter prohibits the release of confidential information, whether or not it would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So even though state law would not criminalize that dissemination of that confidential information, the city charter does cover that. So again, the issues could be that it waives the city council's claim of attorney-client privilege. It could raise possible civil rights violations, individual privacy concerns in the best interests of the city and the citizens the member represents. City council can do a number of things if these things occur. They could issue a notification, a letter of admonition, a reprimand, or even removal for serious and repeated violations. And again, that code of ethics, you can go right to it online and just kind of scroll through there and make sure that you know what your responsibilities are under that charter. So just remember, again, we're going to just briefly cover some Public Information Act information. Any information that is collected, assembled, or maintained by the city is city business. It includes information that the city owns or has a right of access to. And even your text, emails, and social media posts that are on your private devices and your private handles or whatnot, maybe your private email address, if they relate to city business, then you're going to be a temporary custodian. So, I mean, our advice is always to use your official email accounts and phone numbers. And if you are going to be getting texts, if you get a request for public information, just remember to, if you're using both, you need to go ahead and scroll through those and make sure that you're providing that information. So again, this is my information up here. And if you guys have any questions in the future, or if something arises and you don't know what your next step should be, please feel free to reach out. Does anybody have any general questions?
Commissioners, any questions? Thanks again, Sam.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to item A2, discuss regular agenda items, which brings us to item C1, consider approval of the January 27th, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes and take appropriate action. Commissioners, any errors, typos, issues? All right, then we will move on to item D1, conduct a public hearing and consider the request for a zoning amendment for warehouse and distribution use on approximately 22.9 acres located at 1349 and 1399 Valley View Lane within the PD 78 zoning district and take appropriate action.
Hello, Perla Tavera, Director of Economic Development, Tourism, and Planning. So the presentation is in front of you. If you have any questions, here to answer them.
Commissioners, questions?
Yeah, this is an ex-landfill.
That is
Right.
correct.
And so the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, what kind of regulation do they do? Like if an applicant goes to them, what is it that the applicant has to go through to get approval from them?
Well, first they have to submit an application for a right to dig, so they can do the environmental study, and then depending on the analysis that is given on that right to dig, TCQ will then say you need to remediate, you need to make sure the soil's at this level. So at that given point in time, we don't know. The first step would be the right to dig with TCQ. It could take anything from 6 months to 2 years. It's TCQ.
And I would assume that makes this a more difficult parcel to develop.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Is the applicant going to be here tonight?
I am the applicant, City of Farmers Branch Local Government Corporation.
Well, then I have a question for the city. Since we're going to have to probably have an environmental study, which will include a phase 1, phase 2, and probably phase 3, which could take some period of time, I could foresee that because this was a landfill, that if they have to remediate, say, 10 or 15 or 20 feet deep into the landfill, the prospective purchaser is going to look at the cost. if it's cost worthy to do it. Number two, if they remediate it, my first question is, what are they going to do with the material they remediate?
So this is just for zoning.
I
So
know that.
correct.
And the
So
whole
yeah,
point is, why are we rezoning if it's really unknown at this point in time if they'll pass an environmental test?
well, there's a lot of unknowns. We're not going with the unknowns. I'm just going with what's currently what we're asking to rezone
But-
it to better enhance. As mentioned, it is old landfill, so having any development on it is going to be difficult already. So this is our initial step to try to rezone it.
That's really good, but why are we rezoning it if we have all those unknowns?
This was the direction that I was given from City Council to have the city rezone it.
And when you
Go
say rezone, you're adding to,
We're
but
adding
you're adding an
to.
additional use.
We're enhancing
There's
it.
a huge list of things out there that it could, that
That's
it's
already
already
allowed.
zoned and approved for, right? This is just adding warehouse.
You were correct. Yes, there's already a lot of uses. So if we
Yeah.
can let me get to that point. This is already so this is the existing standards, and this is already the current allowed by right uses. So we're just enhancing it as well. So we're making it better, increasing for what other developments can go. But this is currently what is allowed on that site as of today.
Even though it's a landfill.
Even
and
though
it
it's a
may have an
landfill, this is still
environmental
allowed.
issue, we're going to rezone it.
Yep. Even though this is a landfill, as of right now, if somebody wanted to go build one of this is allowed.
So, how many parcels is this? Is one parcel too?
It's two separate parcels.
When the city council requested to have this rezoned, were they
Correct.
specific about these parcels, or was it a general thing for other city stuff to get rezoned? I was just wondering.
Oh,
has
absolutely.
somebody already looked at this specifically, kind of addressing what Harold's concerned? Do we really
Just
think
for
this
these
is-
two. Yep, just for these two parcels.
Okay, so that somebody wanted it. Oh, interesting, okay. The council wanted it.
Other questions?
No, I just want to say, we keep saying rezoning. It's not, I would say it's rezoning. We're just adding one additional use to a huge list of already approved uses. And a warehouse seems like it would be the most likely, if somebody's going to go in there, I don't think a cafeteria or a bakery or a swimming pool is going to have, if a warehouse would at least have a shot at it, more than anything else on this list, I would think.
Okay, so out of all these current uses
These,
that are valid, the warehouse is not on there.
that is correct. That is what we're adding. We're just adding a warehouse to this. Yeah. You can do a golf course. Thank you.
I guess a procedural question, but the city council has decided they want to add warehousing to the scope of this particular two plots. And so it's coming to us and as an advisory committee to advise them whether they should do something that they've already decided they want to do. Is that the gist of it?
Correct, but we still have to go through the same regulation of the P&Z and then
Okay.
council approval.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Additional questions? All right.
I guess I have one about the parking requirement.
Absolutely.
We're using the parking requirement from warehouse and manufacturing as opposed to warehouse and distribution, which essentially doubles the parking requirement. Is there a reason for that deviation? And is there any appetite to bring that in line with the CZO?
We're just trying to do better enhancements for it since it's so limited. Same thing with the landscaping. Rather than 5%, we're asking for 10.
Perla, if I could add to that, the requirement right now under parking is 1 per 1,000 for warehouse and distribution. The staff report talks about the distinction between that and what our comprehensive zoning ordinance requires, which is 1 per 2,000. So the current PD is more restrictive. It requires more parking, and we're not proposing to change that.
Right. I guess my question is, why would we not have the PD fall in line with the CZO?
I think that's a deviation that could be requested at the site plan stage if the developer sees a need for less parking for their use. Just because we don't have those details at this stage, cautiously we're sticking with the current requirement.
Thank you.
Where is ingress and egress? Is it from Valley View or is it also from the north side?
It's only from Valley View. Am I,
It's only from Valley View?
okay, hold on, let me find the map. Correct.
At this time, there's not a site plan submitted, but logically looking at the site, Valley View is most likely going to be the ingress and egress point. The western property frontage is a northbound only lane feeding into the highway, so it would be unlikely that access would be approved there.
And the northbound is City of Carrollton.
Would we issue a building permit for anything on this property without an environmental test?
They still have to go through the same site plan, so they still have to submit the site plan. They have to go through everything, but because it is a formal landfill, we would have additional steps through sustainability. Just as with any other old landfill that we've had here in the city.
Any additional questions? No? Yep.
Just historical context of PD 78. Is my reading of the city maps correct in that PD 78 used to be a lot bigger than it is now? And that like that whole chunk of PD 98, 99 kind of dropped into the middle of PD 78, and this little thing up here is a vestigial part of PD 78 that didn't become part of the other ones?
If I'm correct, and I think Sarah can clarify, but yes, because this was designated as a citizen collection center, an old landfill, I believe it was kind of kept out.
Yeah, exactly as you mentioned, it used to be a large area. Over time, pieces have been rezoned. Currently, PD 78 covers this property and it covers the tract to the west. That's the nature preserve. This zoning amendment would only apply to the property shown in green on your screen.
PD 78 is also the land on LBJ, that commercial strip, right? Between just north of LBJ and west of Luna.
Let me verify that for you.
So it's kind of an unusual discontinuous PD at this point. That's why it looked to me like, no, these right here.
That's correct. You're right. So over time, the PD 99 Mercer Crossing area has taken.
And split it into two different sections.
Correct. Yes.
Anything else? Thanks again, Perla.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. And with that, we will return back to item A3, discuss agenda items for future Planning and Zoning Commission consideration. Commissioners? I would like to potentially include on our study session, because many of us will be attending the Focus North Dallas. There could be potentially just an information share of any pertinent lessons learned, as we've done previously, from that session that may be appropriate for the next session as appropriate.
Absolutely. We'll plan for a recap after the tour.
Great.
Can I ask who all is going to that commission?
We definitely have a quorum. I believe we have 6 members registered currently. So we have a notice of quorum posted. And
Okay.
we should have a pretty good turnout, as well as all of staff will be attending.
All right. Well, with that, we will adjourn our study session meeting at 6:59, and we will pick back up right at 7. So don't go too far.
two, one.
Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the City of Farmers Branch Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. It is presently 7 p.m. Monday, February 10th, 2025. I'd like to begin our meeting by thanking the commissioners for their service. We will start with our citizen comments. This agenda item provides an opportunity for citizens to address the Planning and Zoning Commission on any matter that is not posted on the agenda. Anyone wishing to address the commission should complete a citizen comments registration form and submit it to the chair prior to the start of the meeting. There is a 3-minute time limit for each citizen to speak, with a reasonable limitation on speakers on one topic or item, with a maximum of 15 total minutes on the same topic item. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. The Planning and Zoning Commission is not permitted to take action on any subject raised by a speaker during citizen comments. When called, please approach the podium and state your name and address prior to beginning your comment. Please direct all comments to the commission and not to the audience. We have no citizen comments for this evening, so we will move to our regular agenda items. Up first, item C1, consider approval of the January 27th, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission minutes and take appropriate action. Commissioners?
I just want to say, so since I wasn't here, I will abstain, correct? All right, thank you.
I move to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor to approve? Anyone in favor to deny? And any abstentions? Thank you. And now we will move to our public hearing. Item D1, conduct a public hearing and consider the request for a zoning amendment for warehouse and distribution use on approximately 22.9 acres located at 1349 and 1399 Valley View Lane within PD 78 zoning district, and take appropriate action. Thank you, Perla.
Hello, Perla Tavera, Director of Economic Development, Tourism, Planning. Today we're going to go over the planning and zoning for 1349 and 1399 Valley View. Subject property is 22.9 acres located in this address, planned PD 78, currently vacant. This was a former landfill, which is also the former Citizen Collection Center that was closed in October of last year. City Council's discussion and direction. Proposed amendment is just allowing the warehouse and distribution use. So here's the requirement, current zoning, or a proposed amendment. Farmers Branch Comprehensive Plan actually designated this as a high-density public institutional. The proposed use is not consistent with this designation. However, residential use is not permitted by the current zoning. On January 30th, we had 7 zoning notification letters were mailed to the surrounding properties. 2 signs were posted. No written response was received as of today. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer them.
Thanks, Perla. I have a
Go ahead.
question / comment. Since there is a possibility, could be remote, that some remediation has to be done to this landfill, and that material has to be removed somewhere, should we add something in here so that the purchaser of the property, whoever they are, cannot remove or remediate this material to the Camelot landfill?
I may have to direct that to legal, since I don't know if that's a zoning question, and then they do have to be able to dispose of this with the requirements of TCQ, because you just can't dispose of this in a garbage if it is designated a certain type of material. So I don't know. I think TCQ is going to go above beyond the regulation than we're going to have. So
Well, I have some history with this from years ago, where someone was going to buy that property, and they decided that the remediation for the property was no longer worth the purchase price. And one of the issues that did come up was this material not go into the Camelot landfill if it was remediated. So I'm just telling you a story.
'cause I guess my only other question would be is if anybody was going to remediate any landfill, they would be able to go to any landfill, including the Camelot, and pay whatever price. So hypothetically speaking, you could say the city of Denton has their landfill and they're
But
bringing
that's
it
not
to the
really
Camelot.
true, because You cannot put asbestos in a regular landfill.
At any landfill, including our
Well, no,
Camelot.
you can put it in an approved landfill. Again, I have history with the Four Corners, where the buildings on the Four Corners had asbestos in them.
Mhm.
And that asbestos, all that material, they had to go through a certain procedure to tear those buildings down. And they took it to a special landfill that took hazardous material. That's my only comment. I'm just looking out for the city. Just something that the council needs to talk about, think about before they get into a land sale. And then the people come back and say, oh, but we want to put that, can we put that material in the Camelot landfill because it may be the closest one?
And again, I think I would make the assumption that I don't think we want our Camelot, whether it's being the closest or furthest, to have any asbestos. So I don't know that answer. I don't know if we allow any
I'm just saying,
asbestos.
I'm
in
not
our
expecting an
Camelot?
answer. I'm just telling you a story.
Perla, is that something that could maybe be looked at as part of the sale agreement rather than the zoning itself?
We can definitely look at it as a sale agreement, but I think as a bigger question, I don't know if we allow any asbestos in Camelot in general. I don't think that's allowed as TCQ. I think there's very certain factors that are allowed, and those are, you have to take them a third party, but it's going out a little off topic, but we can definitely have that as the PSA.
Thanks, Perla. Further questions?
I do have one that just sort of came up. Commissioner Trapp during the study session was asking about the PD. Is it currently split? Did we determine? The only reason I ask is because if we approve warehouse for this section, are we potentially approving it also in another existing part of the PD where we don't want a warehouse? So I just I just want to make sure that we're not making, we're thinking that we're only making a decision for this plot, but we're also making potentially a decision for another part. So I just want to get clarification on that.
Yes, I can confirm this ordinance is specific to the subject property. It's written so it's tied to the legal description and it would not affect any other properties.
Great. Further questions? All right, a reminder, this is a public hearing.
Would move that we close the public hearing.
Thank you.
I move we close the public hearing.
Is that a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, we'll move all those in favor to close the public hearing. All right, and now with that, we will hear action on the item.
I would make a motion to approve as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All those to recommend approval. All right, so with that, it carries, and I believe this goes to our city council on
The 18th
the
of
18th
February.
of February. Yes, thank you, Perla.
Thank you.
I was getting there. All right. Well, with that, thank you, commissioners. We will adjourn. It is presently 7:08 p.m. Thank you all.